Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome back after the Yom Tov and everything else. So we were on Ayin Hey on the base, the Halacha of Memachek and Mechatech. These are both leather processing type melachos in the family of leather processing, and Memachek is smoothing and Mechatech is cutting or trimming. That's the broad parameter of the Halacha. As per the source sheets I gave out, I really wanted to do two things. One is just learn Pshat in the Gemara, what the various scenarios that the Gemara describes are, and secondly, try and be magdir and define the melachos of Memachek and what's the core definition of Mechatech, so that we can then know how to extend and apply these melachos beyond the world of leather cutting, which most of us presumably don't do, and try and understand how it applies to Halacha in sort of more common scenarios. But to do that, we have to understand the gather of what the melacha, what each melacha is, and to do that, we need to understand the cases that the Gemara says. So Memachek v'Mechatech, Omer Rav Acha bar Chanina, Hashof bein amudim b'Shabbos chayiv mishum Memachek. So by now, everyone will presumably have seen that even the translation of this phrase isn't entirely clear. Hashof bein amudim means one rubs between the pillars on Shabbos. It's chayiv mishum Memachek. One's chayiv because of Memachek. So Rashi says Hashof bein amudim kagoyin amudei achsadroi she'esin chalonos chalonos. So you're the pillars of windows. And one rubs between the on the floor of the building in order that it should be smooth. One is chayiv mishum memachek. So Rashi learns it's not that you're using the pillars to smooth something else. You're neither smoothing the pillars nor are you smoothing leather or something else using the pillars. You're smoothing the ground, which happens to be between the pillars. That's Shittas Rashi on the sugya. Tosfos already brings from the Rabbeinu Chananel. And those of you who have the newer print, you should have been able to see the Rabbeinu Chananel. I probably should have put on sources for those who don't. Those who have the new print of the Gemara should have been able to see Chananel himself on the side. So Tosfos shofa al ha'omud kedei lachlikoi, that you're smoothing the leather on the omud. So the Gemara is just describing a particular way of smoothing leather, that you rub it on the pillar itself, and that's how you do the smoothing. It seems there were pillars that leather manufacturers had, which they used to move the leather backwards and forwards, and that's how they would smooth the leather. That's how Rabbeinu Chanan understands it, quoted in Tosfos. And then Tosfos quotes Rashi, and he says "V'lo nehira." Very interestingly, he doesn't say what he doesn't like about Rashi. He just says "Lo nehira." It's not nehira. Is it because Tosfos has a conceptual problem with it? Is it because Tosfos doesn't think it's a good reading in the language of the Gemara? Tosfos doesn't really say what's lo nehira in this. I put in the sources also as many of the Rishonim as I could find who quote Rashi, because I wasn't clear entirely what's just in terms of Pshat, what exactly Rashi says you're doing and why you're doing this. So the Rosh says, then he brings the Rach, who quotes from the Yerushalmi. Then he says, this is a better pshat. If you're smoothing with your hands on a board or stone, what mechika takes place. So I don't know who that comment of the Rosh is aimed at. If it's aimed at Rashi, then the Rosh seems to understand that Rashi means that you're smoothing the stone or wood pillar with your hand. And the question then that the Rosh is asking Rashi is that doesn't have any mechika at all. I mean, I guess if you ran your hands backwards and forwards enough on stone or wood, it would eventually somewhat smooth it, but presumably your hands would get worn away faster than any. I mean, it's not a normal thing to do. It's not a normal way of smoothing it.
Didn't he mean that he's talking about smoothing? There's a strange. What the Rosh's understanding was, it's only today I thought it was that his understanding Rashi is actually smoothing the leather with his hand, as opposed to, because he makes a big thing about it has to be smoothing on the pillar dafka. Smoothing on the pillar is a proper malacha, but smoothing with your hand on just the stone, just with your hand, as opposed to, has to be on the pillar. The pillar makes it the melachot. With your hand, doesn't make it the melachot.
I don't know. I had a similar thought. The problem is, the way we have Rashi in front of us, it doesn't seem I don't know. It's not how I read Rashi. No, it's. I don't know if the Rosh had either a different Gersa on Rashi or read Rashi differently. And Rashi says you're shof shom b'kakoi sabinyan. So what are you shof al kakoi sabinyan? So I said you're smoothing the ground. Maybe the Rosh learns you're smoothing the leather there on the ground. For some reason, that's where they used to do leather smoothing. But then I don't know if that's Pshat in Rashi either. I don't know if that's Pshat in the Rosh, either, and how the Rosh is learning Rashi either. Yeah.
The Rosh learning that he's trying to smooth the pillars because Perish Rashi in the first line, Perish Rashi Shafrin and that Sadr Kom, which is not what our Rashi and our Rashi says.
Correct. The simplest understanding of the Rashi is saying you're smoothing the pillars, which doesn't seem to fit with our Gersa at all in Rashi. I agree with you. So something, did the Rashi have a different Gersa in Rashi, or where does Rashi come from that he's quoting? And is this helpful in Tosfos? Because Tosfos does say, Tosfos says sheshof kakoris shebein amotei chalonis. So Tosfos clearly understood Rashi. The object of the shof process is the karka. So even if in Rashi himself, you could say that we've misread Rashi, because Rashi says b'karkoris, on the ground, whereas Tosfos says your shof karkoris, the ground itself, the Rosh doesn't seem to understand like that. So I don't know. Sorry, Adam.
Well, it was just because he said lahachli kan as well in the first line, between the pillars to smooth them, that there was but it's sort of there, and also this whole thing about the hand was the fact that, and also all this says fame I was thinking, but today he did think that it was smoothing somehow Rashi may be talking about smoothing the leather between the pillars with using your hand, and therefore you just say any time you smooth your hand or you smooth on a stone, you're not chayav, because that's not proper Memachek. It has to be on a pillar to make it Memachek, the level. But that was potentially Rosh's understanding of it, which I know no one else understands Rashi like that. The Rosh seems to say that you're. I don't know the answer. The Rashi, Tosfos' version of Rashi says you're smoothing the ground. That's clear. Rashi's version of Rashi, as we have it, I thought meant smoothing the ground, but arguably means you're smoothing you're smoothing something on the ground. And the Rosh, the way I understood the Rosh, wrongly or rightly, is that he says you're smoothing the stone or the nessa. But again, he doesn't quite say that. You're right. It's not explicit.
Surely it's smoothing with your hand, meaning you've got something that's on the stone or on the thing, you rub your hands, so you've got on this hand object and your stone underneath. As you move your hand, that's smoothing on top of the stone. So the stone is the thing that's doing the rubbing. Your hand's not directly on the stone, you're not smoothing the stone on the plank before, that's what you're smoothing on the leather, wherever it was, that's just sitting al gabe, on top of the stone. Or could the stone
would be on the floor? The stone and wood could be what makes up the floor.
But then that's reading a lot of it seems very clearly that the way his presentation, that he doesn't think Rashi correctly, and the way he's bringing this the last line as a contrast to what Rashi is understanding it. So then let us say that that's how Rashi really understood it. That on the floor was a stone, and I was smoothing that would smooth it.
Can we say that means the portions of ground between the pillars?
So we have three Rashis, three versions of Rashi here. In Tosfos, and this is explicit in the Shiur Run, which I printed also, he says you're smoothing the ground between the pillars. So that's one definite possibility in Rashi. And Tosfos slightly alters the gears of Rashi as we have it. He doesn't say sheshof shom b'kakois habinyan, but he says you're shof kakois, you're smoothing the ground. You're smoothing the ground itself. that's Tosfos. That's the one definite factor. We have Tosfos and the Shiur Ran say you're smoothing the ground itself. Then we have Rashi as printed in front of us, who says you're smoothing there b'karkoros habinyan. So does Rashi mean like Tosfos that you're smoothing the ground itself, or does he mean you're smoothing something else on the ground? Not entirely clear cut. And finally, we have the Rosh, who I thought maybe, but I thought meant smoothing the stone or the planks. And now you're suggesting maybe he also means you're smoothing something, the leather presumably, on the stone or the planks. In which case I said the Rosh, and the Rosh also means, you're smoothing the ground with leather. So what exactly is his question?
If you're smoothing the ground, why would you need the statement of Bein Ha'amudim?
Only presumably because that's a place that needs smoothing. There is a Gemara in Baba Basra.
No, I mean if it's leather on the ground, I meant if you've got something covering, if you're smoothing the leather on the ground, not smoothing the ground itself.
Okay, so if you're smoothing the leather on the ground, maybe the poles, the pillars are just a convenient way to do it. Maybe you need to hold on to them to anchor yourself, or maybe it's a convenient patch of ground. I don't know. If you're smoothing the ground itself, then the only reference I have to make to this is the. Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not. My question is not related to smoothing the ground itself.
Right. Okay. So if it's smoothing the leather, I don't know. It's a convenient place to do it, or you can grip onto the pillars. If you're smoothing the grounds, then the Gemara in Baba Basra speaks about this in a different context, and it says normally ground self-smooths because people walk around. But when you're right next to the wall or between the pillars, where people don't naturally walk between it,
okay.
So it needs extra smoothing because it doesn't get smoothed by the normal trampling. I know that wasn't your question, Paul, but it doesn't get smoothed by the normal trampling of feet. Sorry? I don't know. Aesthetics. What's the smoothing that you're doing there? To make the foundation strong, it needs to get, the earth is pressed, otherwise the earth becomes... The Gemara in Baba Basra is talking about the context of the foundations getting weakened by not having normal tread there. The Gemara is talking about a neighbor who builds a wall very close to your wall, and therefore one of the examples I'm going to talk about is, and therefore makes that area it stops people trampling there, which therefore causes your wall's foundations to become weaker because over time the earth isn't pressed down. So I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what to make of it.
Just the words in Rashi where it says when it's not they have a cloud, right? And the words also shenish
Nishanan Olav means that the earth is resting, is leaning on the walls, the pillars are leaning on this earth, I think. In which case, it maybe is implying that the purpose is to strengthen the structure. I thought it was going on the structure again itself. Either the Achsadra, there's some sort of balcony or canopy which is resting on the pillars, or the windows themselves are leaning on these, are being supported. And this is all part of why I understood Rashi, like Tosfos, that your intention is to stamp on the ground rather than on any piece of leather. Because otherwise, why is Rashi getting so caught up in the structure of the building? And what supports the structure of the building? But I don't entirely know. I'm not convinced it's the only way to read Rashi. I don't know.
Yeah, we initially thought like you, and then just this morning we wondered if it actually meant people would sit and sort of lean on the ground between the pillars. That it was a convenient place to stop, and it was on sort of outside of a building, and you were catching the sun's rays but being sheltered possibly.
When the Smachim in Omid people lean, Martin is suggesting people rest between pillar and pillar. It's a convenient place to sit, maybe when you need to engage in leather smoothing, which maybe is a very boring and laborious and monotonous task. So you sort of sit there between the pillars. I don't know.
We did see a translation which said people sit and therefore they needed it to be comfortable and smooth.
Where did you see that translation? Okay. So Artscott said that people sit there and that's why they need it smooth to make it comfortable. Okay.
Can I just also ask? We were wondering whether does it come from sort of shuf, which was smooth, or shafaf, which looked like it was to almost apply a layer of plaster over the top to smooth it out, which again we wondered, because again later on in Rashi he talks about, if I can just find it, v'shafsham bekarkot binyan shanin alav. So it doesn't say otor or something, it says on top of it. So it seems to imply that maybe there's something else going on top of the ground, not just the ground itself.
What's your second yuk?
So the first was this, the shaf could.
But what's the translation of shaf? Yeah.
So shaf could be shuf, which was just a smooth, or there's also shafaf, which was to apply a layer of plaster or glue over something to smooth over it. So so the second date was if Rashi says the alav on top of it, rather that you're smoothing on top of it, not just smoothing it, where you may be actually applying some extra layer of something to smooth out the rough ground.
Yeah, but Rashi doesn't say this. The olive is not going on another plaster layer or something that's leaning on it. I don't believe is the Nishanim olive. I don't think is going on another layer or something that's leaning on it. I find that reading hard.
I just thought, why would you? Alav seems to imply to me you're on top of something, right? You could just use.
No, yeah, but he says what's leaning on it. Yeah, but he says the binyan, the nishan means leaning. It doesn't mean like a layer that's applied. It means something that's leaning on it. It's supporting itself on it. I don't think that's
fair enough.
Okay, so we have a difficult Rashi. We're in good company in finding Rashi difficult because the Rishonim find him difficult. But part of the difficulty is that we've seen three Rishonim, Tosfos, Rosh, and the Ran, all of whom give a slightly different quote of Rashi, or perhaps a different explanation of Rashi. So they themselves are struggling a bit to understand. Struggling to understand it. The Ramban, which I also printed in the sources, the Ramban understands that Rashi is talking about a structural change. The Ramban clearly learns that you're smoothing the ground, because he then asks on the Rashi, he says you should be chayav mishum boina or besod mishum chorish. So this is sending us back to Ein Gimel on the base where we had to look at this, which is if you have it's first a brisa, if you have a hole in the ground, if it's in the house and you fill it up, you're chayav mishum boina, and if it's in the field and you fill it up, it's chayav mishum chorish. Why? Because smoothing a house's floor to make it smooth and usable is boina, and smoothing a field's floor to make it usable and good is chorish. Chorish is the melachot of improving ground. Chorish literally means plowing, but at least the Torah doesn't just mean plowing, but it means any improvements of the grounds of the field. So Ramban says this shouldn't be Memachek at all. This should be the melachot of boina or chorish. So again, the Ramban clearly understands that the melacha is doing something in the ground rather than doing something in the something on the Ur. How would we answer the Ramban? Well, it's possible that if you're making something, if there's a hole which you're filling in, then that is boina or chorish. If you're smoothing, then that is the melacha of machik, of smoothing. In other words, there's a difference. The Ramban assumes that filling in a hole is the same as smoothing, and therefore it should be boina or chorish. Maybe boina and chorish is when you're changing a space. There's a hole in the ground which is a different sort of space, and you fill it, so that's boina or chorish. If you've already got the earth there and you're simply compacting it to press it in, to make it smooth, then that would be the melacha of memachek. So we could answer Rashi from the Ramban's question by saying it depends what you're filling in. If the purpose of the memachek is to strengthen the foundations, then again you could begin thinking about boina as per the Ramban's question. If the purpose of memachek is just aesthetic or to make it comfortable to people to sit there by smoothing it, then you can see why Rashi would say it's a different melacha. And even if the purpose is to strengthen the foundations, you can still see, since the foundations are strengthened by it being smoothed, therefore that's also the melacha of memachek rather than the melacha of boina. So that would be how the Ramban would, how we could answer the Ramban's critique on Rashi. But either way, the Ramban is a fourth Rishon, and he seems to learn the Rashi like the Ran does. It's not surprising the Ramban. The Ran was from the same. The Ran was a member of the base medrash of the Ramban a couple of generations later. who learn Rashi as per how we learn Rashi, that is talking about smoothing the karkois. The only outlier, therefore, would really be the Rosh, who seems to have had some sort of different understanding of Rashi, though we're not sure exactly what the Rosh means by this. So this is just in terms of pshat in the Gemara. Does anyone else have any other pshat in Rashi? Does anyone have any inspiration to clarify this lo nehira malach Rashi? Yeah.
Smoothing the ground wouldn't necessarily strengthen it, but it will make it or come to being necessarily. But it just makes it more pleasant to walk on.
Yes.
So it's kind of a different category.
Yeah, and I agree with that. The simplest understanding of Rashi is that it's not about strengthening the building. It's just because you want it smooth. Perhaps like this reading that it's more comfortable to sit on, or it's more aesthetic. In which case, it's certainly removed from the question of the Ramban. It's not building linked at all. Yeah.
Where this filling in holes, there's smoothing where it's overall rough. It's also a different kind of category.
Yeah, no, I agree. The filling a gumma is clearly is intuitively very different to smoothing. And when you're filling a gumma, you can hear why it's giving it's creating a new patch of ground, and therefore it's boino choresh, as opposed to smoothing, which is just smoothing.
Even though we said the gavshushis was also
Because gavshushis, again, you have a little mound. So again, by removing it, you're creating a new patch of ground. Whereas smoothing is just smoothing. The ground's already there, you're just smoothing it.
So if you had a floor in your meter of your house and you smooth that, is that one of them? Or is that no, just melodic? A floor, you just flattens it out on top.
Yes, in Halacha, it says that they used to have sand floors in their houses, or dirt floors in their houses, and they used to sweep them after use, after meal, to smooth them. And there's Mefurish in Halacha that's boine. But that would appear to be, at least if this answer is correct in Shittas Rashi, that would appear to be a case where there's some form of indentations and so on.
Which is more that it's more internal as opposed to this is kind of on the outskirts of your house.
Well, no, because the Rambam says you have to make up your mind. If it's binyan type function, then the melachot is boine. If it's earth type function, then the melachot is choresh. So at least if we go with this answer, that there's a difference between creating new grounds and smoothing grounds, then there's a fine line between, look, when they used to sweep the grounds after use, it's not called the language of shof. No one was sitting there rubbing it and pressing it and on. So it seems it was just to fill in any, if you have a dirt floor, holes form in it, and you're just filling in the holes, and therefore that's boiner. Whereas when you're deliberately just trying to make it completely smooth, that's Memachek. There's a strong, the reason I'm saying this chiluk is because it's an intuitive chiluk, it's a reasonable chiluk, which is creating new grounds is choresh or boiner, smoothing grounds is Memachek. That's what the Gemara is saying. Now it's true in Halacha, it says don't smooth the grounds of your house on Shabbos, so that's boiner. That's talking about smoothing, which is filling in holes, as opposed to smoothing, which is to make it a gleaming, polished surface. And that would be the chiluk. I'm sorry.
On the block, as an observation, and the reason I know coming back to this point about the yado, he makes the point at the end to say that Marmadika Shafei in the Shafei the yado, if you do it with your hand, how can you call this Mechika? And this reminded me of the Rambam who says if you do it with your hand, it's Ma'abed. It's not Mechika.
Yes.
So maybe he's saying actually, how can you say this is Memachek? Of course it's not Memachek, it's Ma'aved. It's only Memachek if you do it on a pillar. So that's sort of a link that I don't know whether that's to read it.
In the Lo Nehira you're saying, or Tosus? Or
well, yeah, maybe that's the Lo Nehira.
Yeah.
I understand the Rosh, maybe that was Rosh, but I'm thinking that's why the Rosh brings, that's what I was understanding the Rosh to be today, and the learned Josh, that it was referring to rubbing on the pillar as opposed to actual leather, as opposed to rubbing on the ground. Rubbing on the ground with your hand is not Memachek, it's Memachek.
Yeah. So in the Rosh, I brought the Rambam for this reason, because the Rambam also speaks about rubbing with your hands and speaks about it as Ma'abed. In the Rosh, I didn't think that was a great reason, because given that the Rosh is a Mefarish, and he's sort of asking that a question on Rashi. I would have preferred him to say, if that's what he meant, that this isn't, rather than saying Ma Mechika Shayach, he would have said, this is Ma'abed. So it's a bit sossum in the Rosh. The Rosh is bothered by saying it's not Mechika, not that something else. In the Lo Nahir Tosis, it's possible. I mean, the problem with the Lo Nahir Tosis is it's open-ended. He just says Lo Nahir, he doesn't tell us what he's saying. And we also get here into practical issues, which is that I'm at least not clear what Ma'abed exactly is, but it seems that from the Rambam, it seems that pressing the O is also part of the tanning process, which is reasonable. If tanning is trying to preserve the leather, then and remove the moisture from it so it can't go moldy, you can understand why pressing is part of the process. But again, I wasn't entirely clear on this. I also printed, by the way, I mean, just for the sake of completion, I printed the carbon Sanel, who bring from the Aruch, Yavel Ba'aruch, Erech Shaf, Pirish, Sheshishek Sandal Shel Sayodim, V'lo Kashemidi Al Peish Rashi. He says you're rubbing with the sandal of Sayodim, with the footwear of plasterers. So this, who was it? Martin was saying about plaster going on over here. So again, I don't know if the Aruch is, the carbon sandal seems to be learning this as a feasible pshat in Rashi, that it seems that plasterers used to have some sort of footwear that they would then trample on the sid, on the lime and the you see from the Gemara again in Baba Basra and other places that they used to smooth with lime to make a smooth, hard surface. So after they put the lime out, they would then walk on it in order to smooth the lime out. So that seems to be the way the Aruch is understanding, like Martin was suggesting over here, that there's some sort of layer put on top of things, and that's what's being used. That's what's being smoothed, in which case, again, it's satisfactory. It answers the Rosh's question, which is, what are you doing exactly by rubbing the pillars or rubbing the ground? What are you achieving? The answer is you're smoothing out the surface layer over here. But again, I'm not entirely sure. We ran out of time, so I just want to make one more ha'ara, which is that there is a little bit of an internal stira in the Rosh himself, because the Rosh brings that... or the Rach, really, it's not really the Rach, sorry, the Rach, there's an internal steer in the Rach. The Rach brings a Yerushalmi, which he then uses to explain the Bavli. The problem is the Yerushalmi is too good, because the Yerushalmi doesn't say a halacha that Hashof bein Almudim b'Shabbos is chayav. The Yerushalmi says, what was the mechika that took place in the Mishkan? And the answer is, Hayishof in Asoris al Gabe Almudim. So where did they do mechika in the Mishkan? The answer is they used to rub skin between pillars to smooth it off. That's part of the leather manufacturing process. Now, that's very nice, but l'chora, I struggle to hear how the Rach can use that as the way to explain the Bavli, because the Bavli is a very different statement. The Bavli is a statement from an Amora, a halacha, Hashof bein amudim b'Shabbos, someone who's shof bein amudim b'Shabbos, chayav is chayav mishum memachek. So 2 points. First of all, he's teaching a halacha. Don't do shof bein amudim b'Shabbos because you're chayav. He doesn't say this is b'shat in the malacha itself. He's coming to tell you a new halacha that you're chayav. Number 2, again, I'm not enough of a bucky on the language of Gemara or the way language is used, but in general, when we've seen this language of chayav mishum memachek, it's meant it's a tolda or a ko'av is not the core malacha itself. So if the Gemara wanted to say that memachek is the essence, if the Bavli wanted to say that the essence of the malacha of memachek is hashof bein amudim, it wouldn't have phrased it this way. Number 1, because it's a statement of an amora teaching a halacha, and number 2, because he doesn't say harizu memachek or something like that. He says chayiv mishum memachek, which is that we've seen this language by now tens of times, in which it means it's a tolda or at least a ko'av, but it's an extension of the malacha. It's not the core malacha itself. So the Rach seems to bring a Yerushalmi in order to explain the Bavli, but it's a different. The Bavli is saying something different to the Yerushalmi in how it contextualizes it. So again, I don't know exactly how to answer that question. In Mitzvah next week, I'll share with you the answer that some of the Achronim give to this question. But I just wanted to put that out there that the Rach's use of the Yerushalmi is a bit of a double-edged sword. Yeah.
Just in the series of facts, and then sometimes we transition.
Yeah.
The Kiva, clearly the early melachot are always animals. I mean, sad.
Yes. Yeah.
Now we transition to making this general, the class to everything. Is that just an obvious assumption?
If if it's a tolda, the transition is very good. According to Rashi, that it's a tolda, transition is good. The Mishnah says as a melachot smoothing ar, says Rav Acha bar Chanina, there's a tolda smoothing other things. So that would be good even in equivalent to Sidura de Pat. Like Choresh is ploughing, and then there's a tolda thing. So if it's the melacha itself, then again the question doesn't start because the example of melacha is smoothing ar. Yeah. Okay, so we'll stop here for today, and